This isn't like a tourism pitch where I can just pick and choose the best slices of Newfoundland. I'm trying to speak to people that are considering relocating to Newfoundland and setting up a life here. So you need to know the full story. Newfoundland and Labrador is an amazing place, but let's face it, it's not for everybody. I'm going to talk about 7 things that I think everybody who is considering coming to Newfoundland and Labrador from anywhere else should consider before making that final decision. I'm also going to touch on 3 more items that are kind of like bonus items because they're not necessarily specific to Newfoundland and Labrador. They're more Canadian-wide and actually in some cases worldwide phenomenon right now, but they do apply to Newfoundland, so I will touch on them. I just don't want to single them out as specifically Newfoundland issues. A couple of these points are going to be related directly to weather. First one being the late winter. You can argue this point with me if you want, but I don't consider the Newfoundland or at least the St. John's winter particularly long. The issue is that it's late.
That's right, I said it.
Most years we are dealing with dropping temperatures and obviously the less daylight and things like that make it feel like winter. But the real Newfoundland winter with lots of snow and the extra cold temperatures and things like that, the storms, that usually doesn't happen until January. Like, don't get me wrong, it can happen as early as November where we get a big blast of winter early through December. Sometimes we do have very white Christmases, but a lot of years there's no snow on the ground or at most a little dusting of snow on the ground for Christmas when you kind of want to see it. But come New Year, you get blasted with winter in Newfoundland most years, particularly in St. John's, in the greater St. John's area, which is where I'm most familiar with. The issue is come mid-March when you see in other places flowers starting to bloom and leaves growing on trees and things like that. The issue in St. John's is that almost every single year we get Sheila's brush, which is a name that's worthy of a full YouTube video to explain the origins of Sheila's brush. But just know that right around St. Patrick's Day every year when you're over winter and usually like maybe the days are getting a bit longer, so the temperatures are getting a little higher, and if there's any snow still on the ground, it starts to really disappear. We always get one more blast of winter, and it's usually like a big storm. Like, snow falls and stays, and you got to deal with it again one more time. And like I said, you're done with winter, you're over it by that point. But that's kind of the reality. It's not like winter lasts necessarily for 6 to 8 months. It's just that it lasts later into the year when it's time for it to be over. The second item that I want to highlight is the precipitation. So whether it is the snow in the winter or the rain, drizzle, and fog in the spring, or the actual rain right through the summer and fall, we get a lot of precipitation in Newfoundland. It's nothing that most people can't handle, but it can be a lot to deal with if you're not used to it. You can typically dress for the weather, and luckily there are a lot of things that you can do indoors in a city like St. John's. But one pro tip that you should keep in mind, which actually leads into the number 3 point on this list, don't bother with an umbrella. They don't work. That's because of the wind. The number 3 issue to be aware of is that Newfoundland is very windy. It's regarded as one of the windiest places in the world with consistent wind. So this is actually, in my opinion, the driver for why people think of Newfoundland weather as being so bad. Yes, there's a lot of precipitation, which doesn't help, but it doesn't actually get, on average, as cold as most of the rest of Canada. But you can have a 2 or 3 degrees Celsius day with a little bit of precipitation, just like mist in the air, and with the wind on top of that all combined together, it makes for a pretty miserable experience out walking around. So the number 3 issue is actually, in my opinion, probably the most important factor when it comes to can you deal with the weather is understanding that it's a very windy place most of the time. If you're finding this video helpful at all, maybe hit that like button. That gives YouTube a signal that there's some value in this video and it might help spread it to other people. Now, the next group of items that I think are very important for people to understand are all related to transportation. So first being on a citywide level, transportation within the city of St. John's is not great if you don't have a vehicle of your own. The Metro bus system is the public transit system, and I gotta be honest, they're trying. I believe that they're trying, but they're dealing with a city that has been poorly planned for centuries. So a public transportation system dealing with a lot of suburban style neighborhoods and cul-de-sacs and neighborhoods that are just kind of hard to get around, it makes for a big challenge for a public transportation system. On top of that, there is some controversy right now because rideshare services are finally gaining some ground, politically speaking. There's the potential for an introduction to services like Uber and Lyft coming into St. John's soon, but as of right now, mid-September 2023, they're not available as services. You can obviously hire a taxi in any of the major towns and cities in Newfoundland right now, but the rideshare revolution hasn't swept into Newfoundland at all yet. The number 5 challenge expands on number 4 to talk about getting around the province more generally speaking. We have such a beautiful province. We have so many towns and landmarks that I hope that more people get to experience. But it's pretty hard to get around the province, again, without a vehicle. But even with a vehicle, the nature of the remoteness of the island in particular makes it hard to navigate by car. There are communities, particularly around the south coast of Newfoundland, are so beautiful that are hard to get to because you can only access them by ferry. And then there's no road connecting many of the communities in northern Labrador. So the challenge of getting around the province is significant. The number 6 challenge is also related to transportation, but more specifically communications and internet connectivity if you're taking a road trip around the province. The city of St. John's, internet speeds are very fast. Cellular service isn't really an issue. I mean, it always can be, but generally speaking, coverage is pretty good. And in most of the larger towns around the province, it's the same thing. There's no real issues with internet or cell phones. But you can drive between pretty major towns, like say between Bonavista and Clarenville, and lose internet connectivity, lose service altogether in between those towns. And this happens a lot around the province. Now finally, the 7th challenge, also related to transportation, is getting off the province. It is an isolated island on the eastern edge of the North American continent. Planes and boats are necessary, and there's always issues with both. There seems, to me anyway, to be real political will to fix this finally. It's easier to get to and from Iceland from most places around the world than it is to get to and from Newfoundland, and that's a problem. The 3 bonus issues that I want to talk about: healthcare is an issue, the cost of living is an issue, and housing is an issue. But these are issues that are at least present all around Canada. They're not unique to Newfoundland and Labrador. Even the weather, if you're coming to Canada from somewhere else around the world for the weather, you're doing it wrong. There's nowhere in Canada where the weather is good. Like if you're going to the United States and you're thinking about, am I going to move to like Boston or Chicago or Miami or San Diego? Like you have real choice when it comes to weather. The weather is a factor, I guess, when it comes to Canada in certain aspects, but really there's nowhere in Canada that promises good weather. Not to say that you shouldn't understand what you're getting into even with these types of topics before moving to Newfoundland and Labrador, but at the end of the day, these are problems that are going to exist everywhere. So you should be aware of them, but don't pin it on Newfoundland. I just spent a bunch of minutes talking about all the reasons, or some of the reasons, why maybe Newfoundland might not be a fit for you. I believe it's the greatest place in the world, but the truth is, it's not for everybody. And that's what I try to do with all the videos on my channel. Show the best side of Newfoundland while at the same time telling you the other parts of the story so that you're not blindsided by any of the challenges that come up. I spent time in this video highlighting a lot of the reasons why you may not love it here, but there's a lot of reasons why you may love it here, and to get a feel for maybe some of the reasons why it is a great place for you, watch this video right here. It has a lot less of me talking and a lot more just beautiful scenery. If you enjoyed this, maybe consider subscribing to the channel. Until next time, take care.